7 years, 2,555 days. No birthday call, no Christmas card, not even a text when I had the bypass surgery in March. I'd stopped counting somewhere around year 4, told myself a man could get used to anything if he had enough practice. Then my phone lit up on the nightstand at 10 past midnight on a Sunday, and every wall I'd spent 7 years building came down before I even sat up in bed. I didn't recognize the number. I recognized the handwriting of it anyway. If a text message can have handwriting, you don't forget the rhythm of your own son's sentences, even 7 years gone. My hands weren't quite steady when I picked that phone up off the nightstand. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to hope, and hope is the most dangerous thing a man my age can feel at midnight. I read it twice before the words actually landed. Dad, I know you're still up. Saw the article about the dealership sale. We need to talk. Meet me at Harrigan's Thursday at 7. Bring $200,000, cash or cashier's check, or don't waste the drive. I sat up against the headboard like somebody had reached into my chest and pulled something loose. Not "I miss you," not "how've you been, Dad." A number, an invoice with my son's name signed at the bottom. Welcome back, family. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, because tonight's story is going to test what you think you know about loyalty. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. I read every single one. Most men would have thrown that phone across the bedroom. Some part of me wanted to. But another part, the stubborn, foolish part that keeps hoping even after it's been burned a dozen times, whispered something else. Maybe he's finally ready. Maybe this is Ethan's clumsy way of reaching back across 7 years. Maybe if you just show up, Walter, you can fix what broke. I didn't answer that night. Couldn't make my thumbs move. I got up instead and walked through my own house in the dark like a stranger touring somebody else's memories. Same hallway where I'd measured Ethan against the doorframe every summer until he turned 15 and said he was too old for that nonsense. Same garage where I taught him to change his own oil, both of us black to the elbows, him grinning like he'd invented the combustion engine. I stopped outside his old bedroom door, the one that stayed shut since he packed a duffel bag and walked out at 24. I didn't open it that night either. Just stood there with my palm flat against the wood, remembering the last thing he ever said to me in that hallway. He was 24, standing 3 feet from me, red in the face because I wouldn't co-sign a loan for his buddy's crypto trading firm. A different scheme, a different friend, a preview I didn't recognize as a preview at the time. If you actually loved me, you'd believe in me for once, he'd said. Ethan, I do believe in you. I just don't believe in this, I told him, and I remember my own voice shaking on it. You never believed in anything I wanted. You just want me small enough to control. He slammed the door on his way out so hard the barometer his mother gave me fell off the wall and cracked straight across the glass. He never looked back to see it break. He never looked back at all, not for 7 years. I went back down to the kitchen and read his message out loud in the dark, just to hear how it sounded coming out of my own mouth. Bring $200,000, cash or cashier's check, or don't waste the drive. 31 years I raised that boy. Taught him to throw a spiral in the backyard off Miller's Creek Road. Sat up 3 nights straight when he had pneumonia at 9. Paid for his braces, his baseball camp, the truck he totaled 14 months after I signed the title over. And it comes down to this: a dollar figure and a dinner reservation with a cover charge. I should tell you about his mother because none of this happened in a vacuum. Renee and I split up 15 years back. Quiet enough on paper, ugly enough underneath the surface. She kept the lake house, ran through most of the settlement on a man named Gary, and a boat that never once left the marina. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as Ethan's father and started seeing me as a mistake she'd escaped, and she made sure our son inherited that particular opinion. 7 years of, your dad chose the dealership over us. Your dad never really wanted a family, until Ethan believed it the way a man believes the sun rises in the east. I found an old photograph that night, tucked in a kitchen drawer behind the takeout menus. Ethan's high school graduation, the two of us grinning like a couple of fools, my arm slung over his shoulder, so proud I could hardly hold still for the camera. I stared at that photograph a long time. I didn't know it yet, sitting there at midnight, but he'd already become somebody else's version of a son. Somebody else's idea of who I was supposed to have been. So here's what I told myself, sitting at that kitchen table with a photograph in one hand and a ransom note in the other. He's 31 now. Taylor mentioned once he was seeing somebody serious. Maybe he's finally seen his mother's bitterness for what it is. Maybe this ugly, clumsy demand is just the only language he's got left for reaching out. I was wrong about that. I just didn't know it yet. I waited 2 full days before I answered him. And in those 2 days, I kept circling back to 4 words buried in the middle of that ugly text. The only 4 words that weren't about money. We need to talk. I grabbed onto those words the way a drowning man grabs a life preserver. Didn't matter that they were wrapped around a demand for 200 grand. I needed them to mean something more than that. By Wednesday, I'd agreed to Thursday's dinner. But I want to be straight with you about something, because it matters for everything that comes after. I didn't hire anybody to dig into this. I wasn't trying to trap my own son or whoever he was bringing along. I just wanted to understand, the way any father would, exactly what kind of trouble my boy had wandered into that required $200,000 by Thursday. Because Ethan mentioned in that one phone call setting up the dinner that he wasn't coming alone, his business partner, a man named Preston Vance, would be joining us. Preston, Ethan said, had connections downtown, was building something called a private lending fund, was about to change both our lives. The way he talked about this man, you'd have thought Preston Vance walked on the surface of Lake Michigan. So Wednesday night, after I'd eaten dinner alone, same as I have for 7 years, I sat down at the computer with a cup of coffee going cold beside the keyboard and I looked the man up. Told myself I was just being a curious old man, nothing more. The fund's website looked expensive, sharp typography, professional headshots, Preston shaking hands with men in tailored suits at what looked like a golf charity event. Okay, I thought. Maybe I'm about to feel foolish for worrying. Then I found the first crack. A civil suit filed 18 months back, settled out of court, sealed, no public details. I kept digging anyway. 38 years running a car dealership teaches you one thing above everything else. When a vehicle comes back from a customer with even a small rattle under the hood, you don't wave it off. You get it up on the lift. Because a small rattle almost always means something bigger is coming loose underneath. Turns out people work exactly the same way. A second lawsuit surfaced. Same pattern. Investors claiming their principal had simply evaporated. I pulled the fund's registration filings, a business address that turned out to be a UPS mailbox in a strip mall off Route 9, 2 listed partners I couldn't find anywhere, not on LinkedIn, not in a single state filing, not anywhere a real person leaves a trail. Ghosts in suits, standing in stock photography. I sat back in my chair and thought, calm and clear as anything I've ever thought in my life, something is deeply wrong with this man, and my son is about to hand him our life savings. I didn't call Ethan that night. Didn't call the police either. I closed the laptop, finished the cold coffee anyway, and told myself the same thing I'd been telling myself since Sunday night. I'll know more by Thursday. I had no idea yet just how much further down this went. Thursday afternoon, I found the state financial regulator's disclosure log and a stack of tax liens filed against Preston Vance personally. A formal inquiry from the Securities Division had been quietly opened 5 weeks earlier, and there was an emergency motion on file to freeze the fund's operating accounts. I read through those filings 3 times over, same as I'd read my son's text message the week before. My hands weren't shaking this time. They were steady, almost cold. Because in 38 years on that lot, when you find a problem that deep, you don't get emotional about it. You get precise. You trace every wire back to where it starts. So I traced it: county records, judgments, a mortgage on a house out past Cedar Brook that a man with Preston's declared income had no earthly business affording. Demand letters from former investors requesting an accounting of their funds. This wasn't a man running a legitimate lending business. This was a man running a shell game, patching one hole with the next investor's money, praying the whole structure held together long enough to marry into a fresh source of capital. Because, and this detail turned my stomach, one of those regulatory filings listed Ethan Marsh as an authorized signer on the fund's operating account. My son wasn't just Preston's business partner. My son was already on the hook. My $200,000 wasn't a loan or an investment. It was a lifeline, cash to stall an indictment that was already circling before the receivers could freeze what was left. And if I wired it, I wouldn't be helping my son build something. I'd be helping bury him deeper, with my own two hands, because I loved him enough to want to believe him one more time. I printed every page. The lawsuits, the fake partners, the liens, the regulatory notice with my son's name typed into it in black and white. I put it all into a single manila folder, the same kind I used for 38 years to keep repair order paperwork organized back at the dealership. I sat at my kitchen table Thursday afternoon, the same table where I'd first read his text 4 days earlier, and I stared at that folder a long time. Most men would have called the police right then, or called Ethan and screamed down the phone until their voice gave out. That wasn't going to be my play. My play was simple. Go to Harrigan's. Show him the truth, calm and level, father to son. Try to save him from a man who was going to take him down when it collapsed. And maybe get my boy back in the process. I didn't know yet, sitting there Thursday afternoon with that folder closed in front of me, that he wasn't going to make any part of this easy. Thursday evening came quicker than I wanted. I got dressed the way I've dressed for every important thing in my life. Pressed shirt, the gray sport coat I've owned since Clinton was president. The one Renee used to say made me look like I was headed to a school board meeting. I didn't care. I wasn't going there to impress anybody. I was going there to see my son's face for the first time in 7 years. I drove the Lexus, the one I'd bought myself after selling the dealership last spring. 38 years of 6-day work weeks finally cashed in for something with heated seats. It was the article about that sale local dealer sells after 4 decades that had put a number in Ethan's head and put that text on my phone in the first place. Rain was coming down, steady the whole drive out. Route 9, wipers on low, radio off. I wanted to think, not listen. Harrigan sits in one of those newer developments off the highway, exposed brick and low lighting, and a wine list longer than the dinner menu. I'd been there maybe twice in my life, both times for something that mattered. Nothing had ever mattered like this. I saw them before they saw me. Ethan was in a corner booth in a suit that cost more than my first car did back when a car still cost what a car was worth. Beside him sat a man I only recognized from that stock photo headshot on the fund's website, Preston. Slicked hair, a watch too heavy for his wrist, a smile that looked friendly right up until you noticed it never once reached his eyes. Ethan didn't look up. He was on his phone, thumb moving fast, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Preston saw me first and smiled, not a warm smile. The kind of smile a man gives you right before he tells you the extended warranty is really in your best interest. I sat down. The manila folder rested on my lap, out of sight beneath the table's edge. Ethan finally glanced up from his phone. "You actually came," he said. Like it surprised him. Like part of him had been hoping I wouldn't. 7 years of silence, and that's what greets me. Not, "Hi, Dad." Not, "Good to see you." Just surprised that I bothered showing up at all. "I told you I would," I said, and I meant it as gently as I could manage. The first 10 minutes were about as comfortable as a root canal without the numbing shot. Preston did most of the talking. Ethan worked through a glass of scotch that, based on the menu I glanced at sideways, cost more than what I used to pay my best mechanic per hour when I first opened that lot in 1988. "So, Walter," Preston said, leaning back like he owned the booth. "Ethan tells me you were in what? Retail? Cars?" "Ran a dealership for 38 years, I said. "Built it from a 2-bay garage." Right. That's something," he said, in the exact tone you use for something that isn't. "I've actually got a few clients in that space. Small independent lots, mostly. Nothing at our scale, obviously, but respectable little operations." He said it sitting at my own son's table, talking down to me like I hadn't put a roof over that boy's head for 18 years off exactly that small operation. Ethan didn't correct him. Didn't say one word in my defense. Just nodded along and took another pull off that scotch, like watching a stranger belittle his father was just part of a Thursday night. "Dad," he said after a minute, setting his glass down, "we've got something important to go over. We don't want to burn your whole evening." There it is, right on schedule. He reached into a leather folio and slid a document across the white tablecloth toward me like he was closing a car deal instead of talking to his father. Preston leaned in, elbows on the table, and his voice dropped into something smoother, more reasonable, like he was doing me an enormous favor just by explaining the terms. Look, Walter, he said, we know things have been rocky between you two. 7 years is a long stretch. But Ethan's willing to put that behind him, bring you back into the fold properly. All you've got to do is sign here, wire the 200 to the account listed by Monday morning, and you get to be a partner in something that's about to be very, very big. I didn't move, didn't blink. He said partner like he was handing me a gift, like I should have been thanking him for it. I looked at my son, waited for him to jump in, to say, that's not really how I meant it, Dad. He didn't. He just watched me, with a look I recognized, cold, patient, calculating, his mother's eyes, down to the last detail. Think of it as an early inheritance. Dad, Ethan said, flat, matter of fact, like he was reading off a parts invoice. You just sold the dealership for millions. Don't tell me you don't have it sitting somewhere. It's the least you owe me. Oh, 31 years. And that's the word he landed on. Not love, not family. Oh, like I was a vendor who'd fallen behind. On an invoice, somewhere behind us, a jazz trio was working through something slow and pleasant, completely at odds with what was happening at our table. I could hear my own heartbeat over it, heavy and deliberate, like something in my chest wanted to make sure I stayed present for every second of this. I kept my face still. I want you to understand that cost me everything I had left, because something that had been hanging on by a single thread for 7 straight years finally gave way, quiet and clean, right there in that booth. They weren't inviting me back into anything. They were selling me a seat and expecting gratitude for the privilege of paying for it. I didn't raise my voice. I've never once been a man who raises his voice when it actually matters. 38 years on that lot taught me, the calmer you stay when something's gone badly wrong, the better your odds of actually fixing it. I put both hands flat on the table and looked straight past Preston at my son, like the man wasn't even sitting there. Ethan, I said, steady and quiet, I need Preston to give us 5 minutes. Just you and me. There's something in this folder I need you to see. He glanced sideways at Preston. Preston didn't move an inch, just folded his arms and leaned back like he had all night, that same salesman smile fixed in place. Whatever you've got to say to my partner, he said, you can say it in front of me, Walter. I didn't look at him. Wouldn't give him that. Ethan, I said again, holding his eyes, please, as your father. 5 minutes. This isn't about the money. A long silence stretched out. I watched something shift behind his eyes, not softness, nothing close to the boy I remembered. Annoyance. Like I was the inconvenience at that table, not the man who'd raised him. No, Dad, he snapped, sharp enough that the couple 2 booths over turned their heads. Whatever it is, you say it right here. Preston's my partner. We're building this together. Stop trying to run your little mind games and split us up. Partner. He used that word like I was the opposing team. Are you actually here to be my father? He said, colder now, or did you just come to waste our night again? Again. Like showing up 7 years later, on his terms, at his price, made me the one who kept letting him down. I sat there and looked at him, really looked past the tailored suit, past the scotch, past the confidence that a con man's money had bought him, and I saw the same boy who'd screamed at me in that hallway 7 years back and cracked a barometer clean off the wall on his way out the door. He didn't want a father sitting across from him. He wanted a mark, and he was completely at peace with that, sitting there working through his second scotch like it cost him nothing. I understood something in that exact second, and it hurt worse than anything Renee ever managed in the divorce, worse than 7 years of her poison working its way through our son's head. I couldn't save him. Not if he didn't want saving. I slid the pen back across the tablecloth, untouched. I reached down, lifted the manila folder off my lap, and set it gently in the center of the table, right between the scotch glasses and that absurd document with my name waiting on a signature line. Everything you need to know about the man you've made a partner is in that folder, Ethan, I said, calm, even, the same voice I used training a nervous new hire on machinery that could take his hand off if he wasn't paying attention. 7 years ago, you stood in my hallway and told me I never believed in anything you wanted. I drove out here tonight, after 7 years of silence, hoping I could keep you from making the worst mistake of your life, And you won't even give me 5 minutes to be your father. I turned to Preston and held his stare. I'm not signing this, I said. I'm not wiring a single dollar. Nobody said a word. The jazz trio kept playing, soft and stupid and entirely wrong for the moment. I reached into my wallet, laid down enough cash to cover my untouched glass of water, and stood, buttoning my jacket the same way I used to before walking into a floor plan meeting worth a year's revenue. Goodbye, Ethan, I said, and I walked. I didn't look back. I could feel them behind me, the confusion, the anger, maybe the first flicker of fear, though I doubt either one of them understood yet what was actually sitting in that folder. I walked past the hostess stand and out into the wet parking lot, rain still coming down steady under the lights. I sat in the Lexus a long moment before I even started the engine, hands on the wheel, heart pounding like I'd just come out of surgery instead of dinner. I'd walked away from my son again. But this time, sitting there in that parking lot, it felt different. I wasn't running from him. I was walking away from whoever he'd let himself become. I didn't drive home feeling like I'd won a single thing. I drove home hollowed out, wrung dry, something surgically removed from my chest. But underneath all of it, quiet, small, almost embarrassed to admit it was even there, I felt something else, too. I'd given him the truth, every page of it, sitting right there in that folder. Whether he opened it or let it rot on that table wasn't mine to decide anymore. I had no idea driving home under those streetlights how fast that folder was going to catch up with both of them, or how loud the silence was about to get before my phone rang again. If you've stuck with me this far, drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. You're going to want to see how this one lands. The knock on my door came 4 days later, and it didn't sound like Knuckles. It sounded like somebody trying to come through the wood with their bare hands. But before I get to that, you should understand what happened in between. Because those 4 days of silence after I walked out of Harrigan's were the loudest 4 days of my life, and I never had to say a word to make them that way. I drove home that Thursday soaked through with rain and something heavier than rain, and I didn't sleep much that night. Friday I puttered in the garage, reorganized a toolbox that didn't need reorganizing, just to keep my hands busy. Saturday I drove out to Cedar Hill and sat by my wife's grave for an hour, told her more than I'd told anybody in years. Sunday, I went to church, said a prayer I wasn't entirely sure I believed in, for a son I wasn't entirely sure still existed the way I remembered him, and came home to a house that felt about 10 sizes bigger than it had the week before. I didn't call Ethan. He didn't call me. I told myself he'd either opened that folder and was sitting with the truth of it right now, or he'd shoved it in a drawer and decided his old man was just being bitter and jealous one more time. Monday night, I found out which one it was. I was in my recliner with the local news on low, more background noise than anything, half reading the paper, when the anchor's voice changed that little lift they get when a story's finally got some teeth in it. Breaking tonight out of the financial district, she said. Federal agents have arrested a local investment manager on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and grand theft. Sources say the arrest happened at the suspect's own engagement celebration. I set the paper down slow, like moving too fast might make the moment slip away. The footage cut to a guest's shaky phone video string lights, a jazz quartet mid-song, a rented event space with flowers everywhere, the kind of place that costs more per hour than most families see in a month. And there was a woman in a pale blue dress, laughing at something, champagne glass in hand, no idea her entire evening was about to end. 2 men in dark windbreakers walked in through a side entrance, unhurried, moving the way people move when they already know exactly how the next 60 seconds are going to go. They put Preston in handcuffs right there in front of what looked like 70 guests, read him his rights while the quartet just sat frozen, bows down, nobody sure what to do with their hands. And standing 3 feet away, I watched my son's face run through about 4 emotions in the space of 5 seconds. Confusion first, then a kind of blank disbelief, then real horror, the kind you can't fake for a camera. As they walked Preston past him, Ethan grabbed the nearest phone off a table and screamed something into it that I'll never forget. "This is my father's fault. He did this to us." I turned the television off and sat in the dark a long time, just me and the refrigerator humming in the next room. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest with you. Because it would be easy to say I felt vindicated, felt like justice had finally landed, felt good. I didn't. I felt tired, sad in a way that sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't set down. And underneath all of that, way down where I almost didn't want to look, something I hadn't let myself feel in 7 years. A little bit free. I made a cup of coffee I didn't actually want and waited, because I already knew what was coming. Preston was gone. The fund was gone. Whatever life Ethan had spent 2 years building around that man was gone. Dismantled live on the 11 o'clock news for anybody with a cable box to see. And when a man's whole world caves in at once, he doesn't reach for a stranger. He reaches for whoever's still standing. I was the only one left standing. Over the next 2 days, the fallout spread just the way I knew it would. Regional outlets picked up the arrest, ran Preston's booking photo alongside statements from investors who'd watched their retirement accounts vanish into his shell funds. Ethan's name got dragged through the coverage too, the business partner caught in the blast radius of a federal indictment. Part of me wanted to reach for the phone, wanted to shield him from the public embarrassment of it. I made myself put my hand back down. He needed to hit the floor of that reality without a cushion under him, or he was never going to learn to stand on his own. So I waited. Wednesday night, 3 days after the arrest, I was sitting in this same recliner, coffee cup in hand. The house quiet the way it's been quiet for 7 years, now peaceful in its own, worn-in way. The kind of peaceful you get used to, even when you never stop missing the noise that used to fill it. Then I heard it. Pounding on the front door, fast and desperate, and underneath it a voice I hadn't heard in person in 7 years, coming apart with every word. Dad, please, open the door. I need you. I set the cup down and walked to the door slow, giving myself the extra few seconds I needed for whatever was on the other side of it. I opened it, and there he was. His tie was gone, his shirt collar open and stained. 3 days of stubble he'd clearly stopped bothering to shave. His eyes were red and swollen in a way that only comes from crying long past the point your body has anything left to give. Dad, he said, nearly folding into the doorframe. It's all gone. Preston got arrested. They froze everything. Why didn't you stop this? I stood there and let that land, let every word of it hang between us in the porch light. He was looking for somebody to blame, somebody to yell at, somebody to make it all disappear. And in that moment, standing on my own front step, I understood he still didn't get it. Not even close. I stepped out onto the porch, instead of pulling him inside, and eased the door mostly shut behind me. I sat 3 feet from you at that restaurant, Ethan. I said, keeping my voice level, the same voice I used 40 years ago when a part came off wrong on the line and somebody needed the truth without the panic attached to it. I asked you for 5 minutes. 5 minutes to try and save you. And you told me I meant nothing unless I handed over a check. His crying got louder. I didn't know he was lying to everyone. He lied to me too. I know he lied to you. I said, that's exactly why I tried to show you the truth. It was sitting right there in that folder, Ethan. The lawsuits, the liens, all of it, with your own name printed into a regulatory filing. But you wouldn't listen. You wouldn't even give me 5 minutes. You chose him over your own father. And now you have to live inside that choice. What am I supposed to do now? He said, and the last word broke apart so badly it barely made it out of his mouth. He looked at me like I could wave a hand and undo all of it, like I hadn't already tried exactly that 4 days earlier at a table with a folder and a stack of cash for an untouched water glass. I let the silence sit a moment before I answered, because I needed him to actually hear what came next, not just wait it out. I will help you find a lawyer, and I will make sure you've got food on your table, because I'm your father and I love you, and that doesn't stop just because you've hurt me, I said. But the lifestyle you were chasing, the $200,000, the idea that I owe you anything beyond that, that's over, Ethan. You're going to have to rebuild this yourself. He opened his mouth to argue. I could see it forming, another excuse, another way to make this land back on me. I let him get 2 words into it before I kept going, softer this time, because underneath everything he was still my son, and some things don't stop being true no matter how bad it gets. I love you, I said. I will always love you, but I can't fix this one for you. I can only be here when you're ready to do the work yourself. He stood there, mouth opening and closing, searching for words that weren't coming. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The rain had started up again, harder now, and I could see him shivering in that ruined dress shirt, Please, Dad, he whispered. I've got nowhere else to go. You have a home, I said, holding his eyes. My door is open the day you're ready to walk through it as my son, not as somebody collecting a debt. But until you're ready to do the hard work of owning your choices, I can't carry this for you. He stood there in the wet air, mouth still parted, the panic on his face, slowly giving way to something heavier, the first real weight of regret, settling onto him, maybe for the first time in his adult life. I stepped back into the entryway and closed the door. Slow, gentle. I didn't shut him out of spite. I did it because a boundary doesn't mean a thing if you move it the second it gets uncomfortable to hold. Through the glass panel by the door, I watched him stand under the porch light a long moment before he turned and walked back to his car. I went back to the recliner and sat down. Outside, his engine turned over, idled, and faded off down the street. The house went quiet again. I picked my coffee back up. It had gone cold, and I drank it anyway. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no victory in watching my son's world come apart, even a world he'd built on somebody else's lies. All I'd done was refuse to be the foundation underneath another man's fraud. I don't know if Ethan will ever walk back through that front door. That part isn't mine to decide anymore. But sitting there in the quiet, watching the rain streak down the window glass, my mind was clear for the first time in 7 years. Sometimes loving somebody doesn't mean catching them when they fall. Sometimes it just means telling them the truth about where the ground actually is, and letting them find their own way back to standing on it. If this one hit home for you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I'll see you in the next one.